Steve is the Senior Vice President and Director of Insights for Edelman Digital, but he just informed me that he's been promoted. He also told me to say that he was out of prison last week. I think that's what he asked me to say earlier. But Edelman, of course, is the world's largest public relations firm. In his role, Steve maintains a focus on the long view. He studies trends, innovations in media and technology, digital culture, and he puts it all together in actual insights that help Edelman and its clients stay on the forefront. So please join me in welcoming Steve Rubel.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks much. Thanks much. Well, it's something to be introduced by Willy Wonka, you know, considering that there's Wonka bars in all those presentations somewhere. So make sure that you look for the golden ticket because, you know, the Oompa Loompas, if you look in the tag presentation, there's good prizes there, it sounds like. So thanks for having me here today. I want to talk about a big topic, about the nature of authority. I think it's changing. I think we're entering in a new era for the internet. I feel as excited now as I did in 2004. And I actually asked my management to change my job accordingly because I saw something that was changing. So I'm going to talk to you today about insights in this age of overload. A little bit about Edelman. We have about 3,000 employees around the world in 50 offices. And my job is a curator. I work to look at what our teams are seeing, what our clients are seeing, and what thinkers in the industry are seeing, and parse that into actionable insights. So this is not just me coming up here and thinking. This is data that we've collected anecdotally from across our network, which is global. So I want to talk about a story today in 3 acts. I think we are now in this 3rd act of the internet. And I am going to argue that social media is moving out of beta. And we're moving into a new stage. So the first act of the internet, the first era, was 1994 to 2002. And back then, as we know, only the large guys could play. The media companies, brands, you know, anybody that could truly afford the cost of publishing and the infrastructure required. Right? We know the story. And there were a few companies like Yahoo and Amazon and obviously Google early on during that stage that were well capitalized enough and had staying power to remain voices of authority. Okay. Dot-com crash came, cost of publishing and bandwidth went down and storage went down, and that became much more accessible to the masses. We all could publish, we all could have a voice. It started with blogs and went on to Twitter, YouTube, etc. We know the story. It was this era of democratization that ushered in. It didn't mean we stopped building websites. It just meant that now the predominant voice of authority was us, was individuals. And you see it in this image from Egypt. That sign, until somebody corrects me, says, "Thank you, Facebook." So we saw that authority began to change. It was not just the first year of the internet. The same people who had authority were the ones who had authority prior to that in the golden age of television. It was people who could afford content and distribution. Then it changed, and it became all of us. And smartphones accelerated it, and the channels accelerated that. So we know that story. And we saw shifts in trust. A little hard to read this frame, but we do a tracking study every year. You can find it at edelman.com/trust. And we ask people who they trust. And around 2005, 2006, we saw it was people like us. It was peers that we trust. And that was driven by social. The rise of social said, OK, I now have access to anybody who's like me, and that's who I really trust. And this was the predominant driver of marketing spend and interest and where Mashable came to rise during this time, 2002 to 2010. What happened is we started to see change. And now I'm going to argue that the era of democratization is, at least as the predominant force, is starting to sunset. And we're moving into this new era, the validation era. The reality is there is too much content and not enough time. More content will be created today than existed in entirety before 2003. That's more content than we have time to consume. You still have a limited attention span. Your attention span is not growing. I'm going to argue as you get older, trust me, it shrinks. So what we're seeing instead is that there's overload. Not only is there information overload, but there's people overload. There's been a friending arms race that has taken place over the last several years. He or she who dies with the most friends, in quotes, wins. Okay? I don't know if you know or not, Facebook has a 5,000 friend limit. I know that's a first world problem. But there have been people who have pushed that and have figured out that there is a 5,000 friend limit. What we're seeing is people are saying, enough. I need to know where the signal is in the noise. And we're seeing that not just within this crowd, but with everyday, quote unquote, normal people. You're normal, don't get me wrong. But I'm talking about people who are like, my mom and my sister-in-law who are not social media geeks. Okay? Public is seeking expertise. And they're saying, you know what? I'm going to make my own play mix, my own playlist of friends. So what the iPod did to music, technology and curation are going to do for friends and social media. Think of it that way. We're in this age of validation where we're going to vet sources and we're going to look for signal, things that we should pay attention to, and begin to let other things fade away. You saw this, if you squinted at the beginning, at the end of 2009, you saw that if you squinted, you could see the trend. The Oxford English Dictionary Word of the Year in 2009 was unfriend. That was the beginning of the unraveling. People began to say, I have too many friends. The arms race has to slow. There was another study that came out earlier this year that said people don't know 1/5 of their Facebook friends. Actually don't know them. How many people in this room receive a Facebook friend request at least once a week from somebody they have never heard of? Almost every hand went up. How many of you accept them? I'm proud of you. You won the friending arms race. Congratulations. There's a door prize in the tagged presentation. So we're seeing, again, this is an issue. People, we now have access to everybody. You could be friends with everybody and yet never know them. The entire concept of friendship, I'm going to argue, is being devalued. It is being devalued because a friend used to be somebody you emailed, IM'd, phone called, or God forbid, saw in person. And now it's Barack Obama. It's anybody. Okay? It's Mashable. It's brands. And so we're starting to say, you know what? Help me find a signal, please. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. So, and then again, USA Today is great. I read USA Today every morning because to me this is like, Main Street America. I get to see what Main Street America says. And unlike the New York Times, which tends to skew things for the capital of the world where I live, sorry, I get a view of America that's kind of wide. And I saw this story from a reporter, John Schwartz, who I know for many, many years. And it said, social media users grapple with information overload. The word grapple is underutilized in the English language, by the way. I recommend using it more. But again, this is another first world problem that we have. So when I saw this, I was like, okay, this is a mainstream phenomenon. People are saying, I am going to vet. I'm going to make choices. And we started to look at that at our data. We saw that people, this is a trust barometer from 2011, we saw that people turned first to online search engines before they turned to online news sources. Why? People are making their own play mix for news. They're making a playlist for news. The rise of these curation apps, whether it be Pulse or News 360, a great app that's available on the iPad and the BlackBerry Playbook, or Flipboard. Those are curational apps that are helping us make our own playlists for news. And that's a change. That's us saying we want validation. We want to find out where the signal is in the noise. And that's a trend, I think, that's part of this validation era. Another thing that we saw, we looked and we asked, who do you trust? Again, 2011. Remember, 2005, 2006, it was a person like myself. What we saw this year was that an academic or an expert is highly trusted, and a technical expert in a company, which we looked at for the first time, is even more trusted in some ways. People want to know people who know their stuff. And that's a change, and that's going to be something that's going to affect us all. If you look, entrepreneurs are very quick to spot this too. The rise of GroupMe and Beluga and, to some degree, Instagram, these kind of intimate social networks, Path, is driven by the fact that people want to be closer to people they care about and let all the riffraff sit aside. Facebook's layers are going to do that too. That's indicative of people looking for validated sources in the mix. Doesn't mean social media is not important. It is extremely important. But it's not the whole story anymore. We now want a mix, and we want a validated mix. The other thing we looked at in the trust barometer is that people need to hear things 3 to 5 times before they believe it. This is why my mother is very effective. She tells me things 3 to 5 times. I get it after she tells me. Don't drive with a seatbelt nut on. But people need to hear things 3 to 5 times. That's global. In the US, it's 8 to 9 times. What that means is that you have to rain on people enough, not just a little bit, but a lot, to make them realize they got to go buy an umbrella. That's what it's like. 2 drops of rain on people's heads is not going to do it anymore. Years ago, I haven't done media relations in 5 years. The world is a better place. But when I did it, I would go, get press coverage in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, and then that was it. I could coast for a month. Nobody asked me about anything anymore. I had no more pressure. Those days are gone. History. There's too much content now. We need to significantly reach people on a regular basis. So the way you do that is you use this. It's the media cloverleaf. This is the brainchild of my CEO, Richard Edelman. And we think that there are fundamentally 4 different spheres of media, all of which overlap and is gray area and are connected. The consumer, the stakeholder, your end audience, sees this as 1, not 4. They see this as 1. But increasingly, you have to utilize transmedia storytelling. This is not my word. It's a Hollywood word. It comes out of the content community. And what it's talking about is how you activate and tell stories across 4 different spheres of media to engage the public on a regular basis. That's why I went to my management and said, make social media 30% of my job, not 100% of my job. Because I increasingly see the media validation of what's in social is becoming more important. A quick look at these 4. The traditional media is more important than ever. The guys that survived and thrived have done very well. They've innovated their way out. The fact that CBS is doing an online TV show about Twitter is fantastic. The fact that Dateline's running tweets on air, great. This is innovation. They have the big media are still very strong, very powerful reach vehicles. And we use that as a thought leadership channel. It's one thing that we do. This group I love a lot, not just because I'm at this conference. We're calling Tradigital Media. They are digitally native media companies that are largely blogs, sometimes niche focus, sometimes horizontal. And they have incredible social DNA. They have incredible SEO sophistication. And sometimes there's a bit of a blur between advertising and editorial. They maintain a church-state rule, a line, but there's sometimes a blur. And they have higher amplification on Twitter. Do you know that, that some outlets like Business Insider get 2 times the amplification on Twitter than traditional media do? And you can go into Backtype and you can verify this. So this group is breakthrough, and they have high social amplification, and this is why we love brands like Mashable and why we work with them very closely. Owned media. Andy Hayward, former chief executive of CBS News, once said, every company can be a media company. We believe that, and we're training our clients on how to do that. We hired Richard Sambrook, who used to run international news at the BBC for 30 years, and he's our chief content officer. Lots of other public relations firms and marketing firms are hiring former journalists and scribes because every company can be a media company. And you can use this as a very powerful vehicle. And then finally, there's social. And how you prioritize these really depends on your audience. But increasingly, you need to think about how social can drive other media, how owned can drive social, how big media coverage can drive digital and then social. This is connected. The consumer sees this as one on their screen, not four. So don't get me wrong, social media is a great bus to get on to make this happen, but it's not the only bus. But the opportunity, we think, is to propagate new ideas across the cloverleaf. You've got to be the one that stands for something. I don't care if you're a consumer brand, or you're an NGO, or you're in corporate or technology or B2B. You have to be somebody who propagates new ideas and do so again and again. So I want to give you 5 steps for success, 5 things to think about, and then we'll take some questions. First, find out who your subject matter experts are in your organization. Who are they? What do they know? Every company has them. You wouldn't be in business if you didn't have subject matter experts. And if they're in engineering, great if you're a tech company. If you, by the way, subject matter experts do not necessarily need to be employees. They could be your most loyal customers, too. So if you're a consumer packaged goods company, identify your champion customers. But who are your experts who can cultivate new ideas and engage in meaningful conversations around them? If you are putting your experts already in the press, that's a great place to start. If you got employees who are on Twitter, that's another place to start. But find out who these experts are. In our organization, we're blessed. We have a lot of experts. And we have, I think, 1,200 or 2,000 people on Twitter. That's 2,000 points of light, quote a former president, that are ways for people to engage with us around a narrow expertise if they so choose. Cisco, not a client of ours in this context, is a great organization. They do this. They have done this with owned media. They built this website where they had their experts as well as people from NGOs, and they put them up on this website, and they give you a chance to interact with them. They have elevated experts, and it has social amplification as well. Simple example. This is big. I've been talking about this for years, but I think it's still underutilized by a lot of people. On the internet, there's, again, too much content, not enough time. There's a market for anybody who can separate art from junk. My finger paintings do not hang in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and that's for a reason. But there are works, there are from Monet and Da Vinci, et cetera, who did, things better than I did. You can be a curator in your niche. I don't care what it is. You can be the one that separates art from junk for people to understand it. If no one's doing it now, go grab that opportunity. Grab it. It's a great time for you to do that because you will be perceived as a thought leader. And when you curate, you also contextualize and you editorialize because you are deciding what goes into something and what's not in something. Qualcomm. We built this site around a trade show where we had their news from the show, all in one place, and people could turn to it. Simple. We worked with NetVibes to make this happen. Great partner. Okay. Curate to connect. Data. People on the internet do not read. I'm sorry. They read 20% of a web page before they move on. 57% never come back to that page. And they spend 15 to 20 seconds on a web page before we move on. We are a global planet of fruit flies. So you got to keep it simple. We like pictures. We like pretty pictures. We like pop-up books, right? Everyone likes pop-up books. Data and visualizations work really well. People interact with them. You've seen this infographic craze that's been taking place the last 6 months. That's not new. That's old. That's USA Today from 30 years ago. It's just repackaged for a digital age. We built this map for eBay that allowed people to interact and see mobile transactions from the Black Friday season. People interacted with it. But you know what? It also got coverage in media. and it got further amplified. Work the clover leaf. Okay? Dazzle with data. It can be simple. You don't have to have your own data. You can go curate stuff. The one on the right is a doodle that we did. We just found stuff on the web, and we put it together as an infographic. It got covered. Got traction on Twitter. On Get Satisfaction, they're doing awesome stuff. They have an infographic designer on staff. And he puts doodles out, I think, almost every week. And this stuff gets talked about. It's a way to build thought leadership. Put hubs on pubs. Pubs on hubs, sorry. Too many cities, too many weeks. When people want to read, they will go deep. And there are places like Scribd, which we're a very big fan of, or SlideShare, where you can put your content out there and people will go deep. So when people want to know more, give them more and be there to meet that need. Facebook is doing that with Scribd. They're publishing their stuff up there. Ford is putting their stuff up there. WEF, the World Economic Forum, one of our partners, they're putting up stuff on this site. No reason not to do it. When people want to go deep, they will go deep. And then finally, ask and answer questions. Be a source of knowledge. But asking questions, you don't have to have all the answers. I like to say that social media should not just be 100% of one person's job. It should be 1% of 100 people's job in a perfect situation. But think about the legs to media. The press are asking if it's on the internet, does it make it quotable? The answer is yes. Nothing happens in little vacuums. It's all connected. It's all connected. But increasingly, the media, consumers, your customers, the street, they are looking for people who can propagate new ideas in this era of validation. So, sum it up. I believe we are entering the third age of the internet. We went from the era of commercialization to democratization to now validation as the primary driver of the technologies and tools and things that we adopt in our sphere. Increasingly, that means that there's going to be validation that takes place across 4 spheres of media, and how you need to study how messages move across them, and to some degree engineer that. Now, I'm with a PR firm, I'm biased. It's not just earned media, by the way. I think advertising plays a big role in that as well. Paid definitely helps amplify that. And then finally, think about how you propagate thought leadership, and I gave you 5 steps to make that happen. But I fundamentally believe we're at the beginning of a change now, and I feel like I did in 2004 when I, quote unquote, discovered social media. What I mean by that is, I don't mean Al Gore, like discovering the internet. I mean like when I first got into it. When I first started to play with it, I started to say, gee, something's going on here. And that's what I think is happening now with this era of validation. And it's going to change the conversation over the next year. I'm Steve Rubel. You can find me Steve Rubel at Twitter or Edelman.com.
Okay, we're going to start taking questions, so go ahead and line up. I asked my Twitter followers if they had any questions, so I wanted to quickly ask you two that were pretty interesting. Matthew Dooley asks, why don't people use the current filters out there to curate and digest content and slash people, such as Facebook lists?
Why did I use it?
Why don't they?
Oh, why don't they? I think it's too hard right now. But Facebook is an algorithmically curated, it's algorithmic curation. I think EdgeRank is fascinating. And that's kind of helping you separate the signal from the noise automatically. If Erica, you and I email twice through Facebook, suddenly you're going to show up in my newsfeed when normally you wouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. Put another way, I think Lady Gaga has 30 million fans on Facebook. I never see her content in my newsfeed. Breakups and babies beat Gaga at Facebook poker.
That's true. And one more quick question from Shashi Belamkanda. He asked, what is the metric for validation of people, since that's sort of the next stage?
It's not,
how do you tell?
Well, it's
how do you tell who's the
it's
expert?
not clout. I think clout's a start. And I think that it's ultimately up to every single individual. But you know what? Increasingly, we're seeing it skewed through people's worldview. There's a lot of people who like Fox News, and there's a lot of people who like MSNBC. It's skewed through people. So I think there's no one answer to that.
All right,
it's
fair.
increasingly through people's worldview.
Okay, makes sense. Very fair. Any questions in the audience? We have time for one question.
Only one.
45 seconds. Who's going to ask it? No?
It was that clear?
All right then. Thank you
Thank you,
for
okay.
speaking. Really great job.
Thanks.